What's up, guys, and welcome to my review for Final Destination Bloodlines. This is the sixth film in the Final Destination franchise. This one comes from the directing duo of Zach Lebowski and Adam Stein. The basic premise here is you have a sleep-ridden college student who returns home to her family to figure out what is causing these recurring nightmares that she has been experiencing as of late. And in her search, she discovers what everybody else in this franchise discovers eventually, and that is death is nothing to fuck with, and it is on the hunt for not just her, but her entire family. It has been 14 years since we've gotten a Final Destination film, and it's been 5 years since the sixth film was originally announced. It's gone through a lot of changes from 2020 to now. I think originally it was going to be a story about first responders, EMTs, firefighters, police, and stuff like that. And through multiple script changes and different people being brought in and out, it became the movie that we ended up getting today. For me personally, I don't think I would have the Final Destination franchise in my top 10 favorite horror movie franchises of all time, but I have enjoyed all of the movies within the franchise to varying degrees. They're the kind of movies where I think even at their worst, they are at the very least really fun and entertaining watches. And I think they actually ended on a high note with Final Destination 5 back in 2011. And that's why I think I and so many other fans are confused as to why it has taken so long for us to get a sixth movie. And I can tell with the buzz leading up to this movie that people are really excited for it. People still do love these movies. I mean, they traumatize an entire generation of people. You can't even drive next to a logging truck without thinking about Final Destination if you were born in the 90s. And the early buzz coming out of this movie from critics and fans is really positive. A lot of people are gassing this movie up. I've heard people say it's the best movie in the franchise. And so going in, I was getting really excited, and I actually had high expectations going into this movie, which is kind of rare for these long awaited horror sequels. They tend to disappoint, but something about this movie and the energy surrounding for it, it just had me really excited to check it out. So was Final Destination Bloodlines worth the 14-year wait, or did this movie leave me ready to welcome death's sweet cold embrace? Well, before I answer that question, I'd like to ask though, while you're here, go ahead and consider giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel as well for more movie reviews. Make sure to get down in the comments below and tell me any thoughts you have on the Final Destination franchise. What's your favorite movie within it? What is your favorite death scene that stands out the most? The one you think about when you think of Final Destination? I'd love to read everything you guys have to say. Now let's get into the review. As always, starting with the positives, and just to immediately answer that question, yes, I do think this was the Final Destination movie that we hope to get after all of this time. It's got everything that you would love to see within a Final Destination movie, but they also add some things to the formula that stopped it from feeling just like a rehash of the same old, same old. And a lot of these additions were very welcomed. If you're someone like me who was kind of just more of an appreciator of the Final Destination franchise than a diehard fan, they put a lot of things into this movie that you probably have felt have been missing from the previous films. As I said, I saw a lot of people saying that they felt this was the best movie in the entire Final Destination franchise, and I could see a lot of the reasons why people are feeling that way. This is easily by far the best story we have gotten in any of the sixth films. It's never been a focus with the movies in these franchises, but it definitely was with Bloodlines. Instead of having the typical setup of you have a group of friends, they're going on some kind of trip, one of them has a vision of people dying, and then they survive, and throughout the events of the movie, they begin to die within the order that they died in the vision. They switch it up with the whole Bloodlines dynamic, and it really expands the lore, or not necessarily the lore, but the concept of you weren't supposed to survive, but you did, and so now death is coming to collect, but also people within your bloodline are also not supposed to be here, so it has to come for them too. This is also probably the most interesting and invested I've ever been with a group of characters in a Final Destination movie. Typically in these movies, you don't really care about the characters themselves. You're just kind of waiting to see what crazy fashion they die in. And that's not how I felt in this movie. There were actually some characters that I was disappointed to see die. I wasn't just waiting to see how they perish. I was hoping that in some way, shape, or form, even knowing how these movies typically play out, that they would survive the events of this film. And so when some of them died, I was actually kind of disappointed. And that's definitely not a feeling that I'm used to experiencing when watching a Final Destination movie. I also think that this was the funniest of the Final Destination films. That might be a turnoff for some people hearing me say that, but I think it's very tastefully done. Even if you're not someone that's looking to get some comedy out of a Final Destination film, I think they do it really well, and it was a welcomed addition for me while I was watching this movie. But even with all of that being said, this will always be a franchise that is defined by its very wacky, crazy, intricate death scenes. And it's something that you absolutely must deliver on when making a Final Destination movie. And I think that this movie does do that. Now, there is a lot of CGI in this movie. It's very heavily reliant upon it, and the quality of the CGI is a bit shaky at times. I will admit that. And if you've seen any of my previous reviews, you know that I'm really big on practical effects. I would like to keep CGI out of horror as much as possible. But given that the Final Destination movies have always used a lot of CGI, for me, it kind of adds to their charm and the vibe that I have so much nostalgia for. And so this is a rare time where I might actually prefer the CGI over practical, even if it's not the best. It's just what I associate with a Final Destination movie. So this is a rare time where the CGI really did not bother me. Obviously, with these movies, you got to be able to suspend your disbelief quite a bit with the death scenes, and that's no different with Bloodlines. I've already seen some people kind of complaining, like, well, that's not realistic, or that's not how that would work. And you kind of just got to decide to let yourself have some fun with the wackiness that is in these movies. I will say, I don't think this is the craziest batch of deaths we've gotten in a Final Destination movie. There's really only one that I think would place high on an all time rankings of Final Destination deaths, but they're all really solid at the very least. And given that everything else surrounding them, every other element within this movie is much improved over the previous Final Destination movies, I think solid is all they really needed to be. And so I didn't find myself wanting anything more from them in the deaths department. I was also really happy to see that this movie was kind of able to just forge its own path and stand up on its own and not rely so heavily on nostalgia. This could have been just a complete cameo fest that's building off of the previous 5 films. We've seen that countless of times, especially within the horror genre, but there's really not a whole lot of that in this movie. There's some small references here and there, but really it all just kind of came in the form of really fun Easter eggs for fan service, and that was really refreshing to see from one of these, I guess, legacy sequel horror movies, because that honestly is not the route that a lot of them tend to go. However, there is one returning character in this movie, and of course, I'm talking about the legendary Tony Todd. As many know, we recently lost him, and I'm going to try to get through this part of the review without getting emotional, because I sure wasn't able to keep it together watching his scene in this movie. He's an absolute legend to the horror genre. I think the character of Candyman is probably the most underrated slasher that's ever existed. He's been in a lot of other and numerous horror projects, and I just want to pay my respects to him. And the scene that he has in this movie is by far the most powerful and emotionally resonant scene that's ever been in this franchise. It really didn't feel like he was even talking to the characters. It felt like he was talking to us horror fans, because it seemed like very much so an actor that knows he is towards the end of his life. And it was kind of just a goodbye to us, and just, yeah, uh, yeah, just an absolute legend. Rest in peace, Tony Todd. I'm glad he was able to wrap up his character in these movies, and, thoughts and prayers to his family. All right, now that I've taken some time to recover from that, we can get into the negatives of this film. And though I did say this is the most invested I've ever been in a batch of characters within the Final Destination franchise, there were a couple of things about them that did frustrate me. They make a lot of dumb decisions, and I know characters making dumb decisions is kind of a staple of the horror genre, but sometimes it's harder to look over than others. They'll go from knowing that they have to be super careful about everything surrounding them to just making the dumbest decision you could possibly make in this situation. There's a plot element where the main character, can kind of see the future and see how things are going to play out, but she really only does it once. It doesn't come back up in the film ever. And so it feels like something that could have just been removed from the movie entirely, and it wouldn't have made a difference. I don't know why it was included at all. There's also the classic nobody believes the main character until multiple people die, and if they had just believed them, then that could have all been avoided. That's a trope in horror movies that frustrates the hell out of me, and of course it's here in this movie once again. Admittedly, these are kind of just nitpicky complaints. I really didn't see any glaring issues with the movie while I was watching it. These are just some things I wanted to mention that didn't fully work for me. And I understand that given the nature of the kind of movies that these are, there are just a lot of things you have to accept so that the plot can play out the way that it needs to. And none of these complaints I have really ruined the movie in any significant way. I still had a ton of fun and enjoyment with this movie. So there you guys have it. Those are all of my thoughts on Final Destination Bloodlines. I definitely think this movie was worth the wait. It was the Final Destination movie that I'd hoped it would be and more. I think they improved upon a lot of things that previous Final Destination movies weren't be lacking. And so the people saying that this is the best of the franchise, I have to give it some more thought, but it very easily could be for me as well. So if you're a Final Destination fan, I think you'll definitely be satisfied with this movie. I 100% recommend you go check this movie out in theaters. I think it's well worth the price of admission. I think you'll have a ton of fun with it. If you go with a group of friends, it'll even add more to the experience. It's just a bloody good time that Final Destination movies always manage to deliver. Before you get out of here, please consider leaving a like on the video and subscribe to the channel as well for more movie reviews. I'd love to have you here on the channel. Don't forget to get down in the comments below. Tell me what your favorite Final Destination film is or your favorite death scene within them. Like I said, I would love to read everything you guys have to say, and I will see you all in the next movie review. Peace.